The numbers are shocking. America's national debt has crossed $34 trillion and it's rising every single second. Politicians keep raising the debt ceiling, the government keeps borrowing, and the public? They are left wondering, how long can this go on before it all comes crashing down? From rising interest rates to record breaking deficits, some experts are warning of an economic time bomb, one that could explode in the form of inflation, job losses, and a financial crisis unlike anything we've seen before. But is the US really heading toward disaster? Or is this just the new normal in a global economy fueled by debt? In today's video, we are breaking it all down. What's driving America's debt? Who really owes who? And most importantly, what it means for you, your wallet, and the future of the US economy. Let's get started. Before we dive into the crisis, we need to understand what the US national debt actually is and what it's not. At its core, national debt is the total amount of money the federal government owes to its creditors. Think of it like a giant credit card bill, one that keeps growing every year. This debt comes from borrowing money to cover the gap between what the government spends and what it earns through taxes. When Washington runs a deficit, meaning it spends more than it collects in a year, it borrows the difference. And that borrowed money, it adds to the national debt. But here's what many people don't realize. The debt isn't owed to just one place. It's split into two major categories. Public debt, money borrowed from investors, banks, foreign countries, and everyday Americans through things like treasury bonds. Countries like China and Japan are some of the biggest foreign holders of US debt. Intra-governmental debt, this is money the government owes itself. For example, the Social Security Trust Fund collects more than it pays out and lends the surplus to the federal government. So when you hear people say America is in debt, it doesn't mean the country is broke. In fact, the US has never defaulted on its debt. Investors still trust it as one of the safest places in the world to park their money. But here's where the problem begins. As the debt keeps growing and as interest rates rise, the cost of paying just the interest on that debt is ballooning. And that brings us to a dangerous tipping point, because when more of your budget goes toward paying off old loans, there's less money for things like healthcare, infrastructure, and education. The national debt is no longer just a number on a chart. It's becoming a burden that future generations will have to carry unless something changes. When we talk about the America's debt crisis, there's one powerful player quietly influencing everything behind the scenes. And that's the Federal Reserve. Known simply as the Fed, it's the central bank of the United States. While it doesn't create the debt directly, its decisions shape how that debt grows and how much it costs to manage. One of the Fed's biggest responsibilities is controlling interest rates, the very rates that determine how expensive it is for the government to borrow money. When the economy is weak or facing a crisis, the Fed lowers interest rates. This makes borrowing cheaper, encourages spending, and helps stimulate growth. But when inflation begins to rise, like it did after the pandemic, the Fed starts raising those rates to slow things down. That might sound like a smart move, but it comes with a catch. As rates go up, so does the cost of repaying America's massive debt. In 2024, the US already spent hundreds of billions of dollars just to cover interest, and that number is only going up. But interest rates aren't the only way the Fed shapes the economy. During financial emergencies like the 2008 crash or the COVID-19 pandemic, the Fed takes even bigger steps, like printing digital money and using it to buy US Treasury bonds. This strategy, known as quantitative easing, helps stabilize markets and inject cash into the system. It also keeps interest rates low, which in turn keeps the government's borrowing costs manageable. But creating money out of thin air has its risks. Over time, it can lead to inflation, weaken the dollar, and reduce the purchasing power of ordinary Americans. Despite its efforts to keep the economy stable, the Federal Reserve is constantly caught between two pressures: fight inflation or support growth. But with the national debt climbing higher every year, its ability to control either is shrinking. The more the government borrows, the more the Fed has to step in, and the harder it becomes to strike the right balance. In the end, the Federal Reserve doesn't write the checks, but it does decide how painful those checks will be to repay. And in a world where debt is growing faster than ever, the Fed's next move could either calm the storm or accidentally trigger the next financial disaster. When people hear about the national debt, it often feels like a distant issue, something only politicians and economists need to worry about. But the truth is, this crisis is already starting to impact the daily lives of ordinary Americans, and it's only getting worse. Let's start with the basics. As the debt rises, so does the amount of money the government has to spend just on interest payments. We are talking about hundreds of billions of dollars every year. Money that could be used to improve schools, fix roads, expand healthcare, or invest in the future. Instead, it's going toward paying off old loans. That means fewer public services and a government that's constantly cutting corners. For regular people, this translates into longer waits at hospitals, crumbling infrastructure, underfunded education, and less help for those in need. In short, you're paying more in taxes but getting less in return. But that's just one layer of the problem. As debt grows, investors begin to question how safe it is to lend to the US government. To keep attracting lenders, the government is often forced to offer higher interest rates. And when that happens, borrowing becomes more expensive. Not just for the government, but for everyone. So whether you're trying to buy a house, start a business, or pay off student loans, your interest rates go up too. That car loan, that credit card debt, suddenly you're paying more simply because the country's debt is out of control. And let's not forget about inflation. When the government prints more money to cover its spending, the value of the dollar weakens. Prices for groceries, gas, and rent rise. Your paycheck stays the same, but everything around you gets more expensive. This invisible tax, inflation, hits low and middle income families the hardest. The rich may not feel it much, but for millions of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, it's a financial nightmare. So no, the debt crisis isn't just a problem for Washington. It's something that affects your wallet, your future, and your children's future. And if nothing changes soon, the burden will only grow heavier for the next generation. To fix the debt crisis, the US needs bold and balanced action. That means cutting unnecessary government spending while also increasing revenue, possibly through tax reforms. Entitlement programs like Social Security and Medicare may need adjustments to stay sustainable. At the same time, smarter budgeting, reducing military waste, and investing in economic growth can help reduce the debt over time. But none of it will work without political will. Leaders must put long-term stability ahead of short-term politics. Without real reform, the debt will only keep growing and the consequences could be severe. America's debt crisis isn't just about numbers on a screen. It's about the future of the country. The choices made today will shape the economy for generations to come. Will leaders step up and make the tough calls? Or will the rising debt continue to drag the nation toward a financial disaster? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain. Ignoring the problem is no longer an option. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more insights on the issues that matter. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.